Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take your stack of documents and we really zero in on what matters. Today, we've got quite the collection. It centers on a formal complaint from August 2022, but it's supported by a whole load of internal notes, emails, even court documents and guidelines.
Yeah, it's a pretty extensive set, all concerning one major organization, and they really lay out concerns across, well, several key areas.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to navigate through all this with you, pull out those key insights, and really shine a light on a series of alleged issues. We're talking procurement, project management, finances, even HR.
And as you explore these sources, what really jumps out is the complexity, how different concerns seem to overlap.
Right.
You see questions popping up about processes, about quality, accountability, were the rules actually followed? It's a lot, so maybe let's take it piece by piece.
Good idea. Let's start right at the beginning. Procurement and tendering. How suppliers and contractors got picked. The documents mention some specific directives coming from pretty high up.
Yeah, that's right. There's a striking account from February 2022. The sources claim the CMD, that's the Chief Managing Director, apparently told the CE division to make a central list of brands for everything, across all projects.
A central list for everything. Wow. And did that happen quickly?
It seems so. Something called Circular Number 112 came out that same month, and the allegation is quite specific. 5 steel brands, RINL, SAIL, Tata, JSW Steel, and JSPL were just picked, approved solely by the CMD.
Yes. What was the reasoning given?
Well, that's the thing. The source claims there was no technical basis, no commercial reason, nothing specified for choosing only those 5.
So the question raised is, why ignore other brands even if they had the right quality certifications?
Exactly. And it wasn't just steel. The source alleges a similar thing happened with cement 5 brands again, apparently identified by the CMD, again, seemingly without any formal analysis beforehand.
Okay. Was there any internal discussion about this later?
There was an internal committee mentioned, with members like Rakesh Garg, Pranay Jain, K.N. Sharma. And interestingly, there's an email referenced from K.N. Sharma.
What did it say?
Basically that, in his view, no other brands needed to be added. So it suggests some internal acceptance, at least from that member.
Okay, so that's materials. What about choosing the actual contractors? The documents mention issues with tenders overseas, in the Maldives.
Yes, specifically in the Maldives projects. The source claims a foreign experience condition was deliberately put into the tender.
Foreign experience, okay, and why was that allegedly an issue?
Well, the claim is that this condition favored 2 specific, maybe pre-identified contractors, Ms. Renatus and Ms. Verandera Constructions.
Like so?
Because apparently they were the only 2 companies that bid on all the tenders where this condition was used. And get this, the source says their only prior foreign experience was from working for this same organization.
So it wasn't like broad international experience.
Seemingly not from other major public sector work, according to the claim. It sounds like a very narrow path to qualification.
And wasn't there another specific issue in one of those Maldives tenders, package 3, I think? Something about working bid capacity.
Right, the working bid capacity parameter, basically a calculation to see if a company can financially handle the job size. The sources say this was introduced quite recently, just before this tender.
Okay, and there was a complaint.
Yes, Verandera complained about the other bidder, Reanatus. They said Reanatus submitted wrong information for that calculation.
And what was the outcome of that complaint? Was it upheld?
The response was pretty drastic, according to the source. First, they nullified the amendment that introduced the parameter in the first place.
Okay.
Then they canceled the entire tender and called for a fresh one.
Wow. So in the new tender, was Reanatus, the one accused of submitting wrong info, still allowed to bid?
Yes, they were allowed to bid again. But ultimately, Verandera, the one who complained, ended up winning the retendered contract.
Interesting. And the source flags the timing.
Yeah, the source points out that the parameter was canceled just a week before the new tender was invited, evaluated, and awarded. The complainant suggests this points towards the contractor being pre-identified.
There's another quite serious allegation, isn't there, about using an unapproved, even a fake brand on a project.
Yes, that's in there. The claim is this brand was supplied and installed by an agency that allegedly didn't have the basic requirements.
Like what kind of requirements?
Things like an official OEM distribution license or the kind of financial track record you'd expect. The source even claims this agency was basically set up or floated right around the time the tender notice, the NIT, came out.
And something about fake certificates being accepted.
Exactly. A fake experience certificate submitted by this company was allegedly accepted, and the source names specific officials involved in accepting it. Suman Kumar, and Rakesh Garg.
Okay, so we're seeing alleged issues in how materials were picked, how contractors were selected. Let's shift now to the work itself. Quality, project execution. There's a case mentioned, SVNIT.
Yes, the SVNIT site. The sources talk about a technical audit report done by Rakesh Garg, the same name we just heard concerning alleged poor quality there.
And the source takes issue with this report.
Strongly. It calls it a motivated technical audit report. The allegation is he blamed lower-level officials without really providing solid evidence or logic. And apparently he didn't even visit the site himself.
And was there something specific he allegedly left out?
The source claims he suppressed a key point from the organization's own works manual, that the zonal in charge was actually based at the site and was, therefore, 100% responsible for quality checks.
So pointing fingers downwards while ignoring direct site accountability.
That's the allegation. Plus, a technical point. The report apparently relied on conclusions from a test for chlorides and materials, but the source says that specific test wasn't even prescribed or required at the time the work was done.
Interesting. It sort of echoes that question about following established procedures we talked about earlier.
It does. And this theme continues with another big situation detailed in the documents. NBCC Greenview in Gurgaon.
Yes, Greenview. I remember hearing about issues there. What do the sources say?
They reference an IIT Delhi report that indicated, well, pretty poor quality, and the timeline is complex.
How so?
The work was finished way back in 2017. Occupancy certificates, completion certs, all issued. People were given possession of their homes.
But then problems emerged later.
Yes, structural issues came up, described as latent defects, things hidden at first that only appeared over time. Now, the source says the work is deemed unacceptable quality. Basically incomplete. It hasn't served its purpose.
That sounds bad. What's the practical consequence mentioned?
A very stark one. Only about a third of the apartments in that project have actually been sold, and it has knock-on effects for the contractor involved, too.
Who was that?
Rama Civil Construction. They did the balance work there. Now, because there's so much structural repair retrofitting needed, the documents say their contract has to be kept alive.
Kept alive, right?
Through extensions of time or EOTs, basically allowing them more time officially so they can stay on site and do the repairs.
Was that straightforward, granting these extensions?
The documents suggest there was internal debate. Even recommendations from the TSC, that's likely the technical subcommittee, about granting these EOTs, despite the original delays on the project.
Okay, so keeping Rama Construction involved at Greenview.
Yeah.
Does this connect to other allegations about them?
It seems to. The source claims that Rama Constructions allegedly used fake completion or performance certificates specifically from projects like NBCC Heights and Greenview.
The ones with issues?
Right. Allegedly used those certificates to help them win contracts on other big projects.
Which ones?
Major ones like the Amrapali projects, Dream Valley, Crystal Homes are named, and also a project called Isik Bita.
And again, are specific individuals named in connection with accepting these alleged fakes?
Yes. The source alleges specific technical subcommittee members accepted them. Rakesh Garg, again, for Rakesh Kumar, and R.K. Agrawal.
This gets more complicated because wasn't Rama Constructions blacklisted at some point?
That's another layer. The source claims that even though Rama Constructions was blacklisted, by direction of the Secretary at the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Mohue, back in Feb 2021.
Their contracts on these other projects like Amrapali and Isik Bita weren't terminated.
Correct. The contracts were apparently allowed to continue. The source does mention there was an opinion from the organization's law division about not terminating, suggesting there was some internal legal rationale discussed.
Okay, let's move to another major project highlighted, the ITPO IECC project. The sources mention a CDC report, Central Vigilance Commission.
Yes, a CVC report from 2020. And according to the source, it identified some really significant alleged issues.
Like what?
Over 400 crore rupees. That's a huge amount in alleged excess payments made to the main contractor, Shapurji Palanji.
Excess payments. And there's something about advances, too.
Yes, special advances given to Shapurji Palanji. The issue, according to the source citing the CVC, was that these advances weren't actually part of the original tender conditions.
And why is that a problem?
Because, according to CVC guidelines referenced in the source, giving such non-tendered advantages could vitiate the tender. Basically, it could make the whole award process unfair or legally questionable because the advertised rules weren't strictly followed.
Did the contractor acknowledge these advances?
Well, the documents include a reference to a letter from Shapoorji Pallonji in June 2021. They were asking for the recovery of these advances to be deferred.
Deferred, why?
They cited cash flow problems, the impact of COVID-19 naturally, and also delays in getting the project finished as reasons they couldn't repay the advances right away.
Okay, so we've seen procurement issues, quality control problems, contractor management controversies. It inevitably leads to questions about money. Let's dig into the financial side. What do the documents allege about financial management?
Well, there's a general claim that pops up that the organization sometimes used its own corporate funds to pay project bills when the client hadn't provided enough money yet.
For which projects?
Examples given are JNNURM Haryana and that ITPO project we just discussed.
Okay. There's a very specific issue detailed about funds for the IIT Mandi project.
Yes, this one's quite detailed. The allegation is that money received from the client, IIT Mandi, wasn't put into a separate, dedicated bank account just for that project.
Where did it go then?
It allegedly went into NBCC's general pool account, and the source says this directly violated Clause 6.8 of the MOU, the agreement they had with IIT Mandi.
What was the consequence of pooling the funds like that?
The interest earned on that money, which should have belonged to the project or the client, was apparently taken into NBCC's own income statement.
So potentially boosting their reported profits.
That's the claim, that it inflated profits and bank balances for years.
Did this ever get sorted out?
Eventually, yes. According to the documents, the interest, which came to about 9.34 crore rupees, was refunded to IIT Mandi, but only in May 2020.
And what prompted the refund?
It seems it happened after the client, IIT Mandi, started withholding payments, and also after the CAG, the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, raised objections during an audit.
So external pressure and audits played a role. There's another, maybe even bigger funding issue alleged related to the PMGSY Bihar projects. That's the rural road scheme, right?
Exactly, Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. Here, the allegation is quite stark. An illegal transfer of over 70 crore rupees.
70 crore. Where from and where to?
From the government account set up for this specific PMGSY project in Bihar, apparently funds just sitting there idle after the projects were finished transferred to NBCC's main head office account.
And this happened with...
The source claims this happened about a decade before the complaint was filed, and that it was a clear violation of the PMGSY guidelines.
What did those guidelines say?
They're pretty clear, according to the references. Funds should be in a separate, single project account. Any interest earned belongs to the PMGSY funds, not the implementing agency, and contractors need to be paid on time. The specific agreement with Bihar also apparently mandated the separate account.
So 70 crore sitting elsewhere for a decade.
Mm.
The interest must have been significant? Was that ever returned?
The source claims the interest wasn't returned until someone filed an anonymous complaint specifically about it.
An anonymous complaint triggered it.
That's the claim. And there's an internal note mentioned from March 2019 showing these large sums being moved from the Bihar project accounts back to the head office fund section.
Why that?
The note apparently cites instructions from internal officials and mentions a request from NRDA, the National Rural Roads Development Agency, asking for the funds to be handed over or refunded.
So again, external prompting seems key. Are there other more general financial allegations?
Yes, the documents also mention things like delays in recovering money owed both principal and interest on advances given out, and also claims that sometimes direct payments were made to vendors or subcontractors even when the main contractor already had advances meant to cover those costs.
Potential double dipping or just poor tracking?
The documents don't specify the exact mechanism, just flag it as an issue. And finally, in this financial area, there's a dispute mentioned with TRRDA that's likely Tripura Rural Roads Development Agency.
What were the issues there?
Several are listed. Payments allegedly made for work not done or with inflated measurements, over 27 crore claimed there. Also, when bank guarantees from defaulting contractors were cashed, apparently only part of the money, about 8.26 CR out of 15.73 CR, was deposited correctly.
And failure to recover funds from defaulters.
Yes, that too, allegedly contrary to the bidding document requirements.
And the bottom line impact of all this in Tripura?
The source claims it led to extra costs of around 10.64 crore rupees just for restoring the roads that weren't properly completed or maintained. So, yeah, these financial details really underscore how vital strict fund management is.
Absolutely. With all these alleged problems across procurement, projects, finance, you naturally start asking about the oversight, accountability. What did the document say about vigilance and internal controls?
Well, the source uses a very blunt term repeatedly: bad vigilance.
Bad vigilance, meaning what exactly?
Meaning the allegation is that they didn't take prompt action against officials when complaints came in, even if those complaints included alleged proof.
Are specific examples given of this alleged inaction?
Yes, the names we've heard before come up again. Rakesh Garg, linked to that SV&IT audit and the fake certificate issue, and Hrishikesh Kumar, connected to the PMGSY fund transfer and also the fake certificate allegations.
Does the source compare this alleged inaction to any standard timelines?
It does. It references the CVC's own guidelines, specifically appendices 4D and 4E, which set out timelines for handling vigilance cases. The implication is that the alleged delays within the organization didn't meet these external benchmarks.
Is there a sense that information about these issues was being managed, maybe even withheld?
That's another claim. That information about this alleged lack of action against certain preferred officials, for instance, in the Rama Construction Tender Awards, was possibly kept out of presentations given to higher authorities like Moise Yue and the CVC.
And potentially withheld elsewhere, too.
Yes. The source also alleges information about the NBCC Greenview problems was suppressed from Parliament.
That's a serious allegation. And it ties into concerns about promotions.
Right. The source expresses concern that there were plans to promote some of these officials, specifically naming Rakesh Garg and Hrishikesh Kumar again, despite these ongoing vigilance flags.
Even if senior management was aware.
The source alleges the disciplinary authority, named as CMD PK Gupta, was aware of the alleged culpability. It also notes, perhaps significantly, that Rakesh Garg was due to retire just a few months after the complaint was filed in January 2023.
Okay, so vigilance concerns. Now, let's shift within the internal workings to HR, human resources. The documents detail some specific grievances about promotions, right?
Yes, quite detailed ones. There's an allegation about the promotion of someone named Shri P.S. Rao to CGM Chief General Manager of Engineering.
What was the issue there?
Mr. Rao had apparently received a major penalty that included a specific period where he was debarred from promotion. That period was supposed to end in December 2021.
But he was promoted earlier.
The allegation is yes, that the DPC, the Departmental Promotion Committee meeting that recommended his promotion, was held back in September 2021 while he was technically still in that debarment period.
This had seniority implications. How did that work?
When he was actually promoted in December 2021, after the debarment ended, he was allegedly placed ahead on the seniority list of other CGMs who had been promoted fair and square in an earlier DPC from 2019-20.
So jumping the queue, essentially.
That's the claim. The source calls it a blatant violation of Government of India seniority rules, citing a specific office memo from 2004. It disrupted the established order, allegedly against the rules.
Okay. And there's another person, Shri Ravi, with detailed grievances about his potential promotion to ED, Executive Director.
Yes, relating to that same 2019-20 DPC process, Shri Ravi claims, based on objective criteria laid out in the documents, he was a stronger candidate, but was overlooked.
Why does he think he was overlooked?
He alleges discretionary marking and manipulation during the interview part of the DPC process were used to deny him the promotion.
Does he point to specific policy issues?
He does. He raises concerns about changes made to the fast-track promotion policy. Specifically, he claims the eligibility time for diploma holders was shortened from 6 years down to 4 years.
And his issue with that change?
He alleges it was done with ill motive, his words, specifically to promote diploma holders more quickly, potentially making them senior to degree holders like himself, creating unfairness.
He also had issues with the promotion policy itself.
Yes, claiming the new policy used for that DPC was arbitrary and rushed through, approved hastily just before the interviews. And he makes quite serious claims about APRs.
APRs, those are the annual performance appraisal reports.
Exactly. He alleges they were written and, crucially, accepted by the accepting authority named again as CMD PK Gupta after the official deadlines, and that they contain generic remarks that weren't justified.
Strong words used.
He calls it a cybercrime and misuse of power in the documents. Really highlights his deep frustration with the process.
Okay, one last point under this internal processes section. Consultant selection, Chapman-Taylor LLP is mentioned. From the UK.
Yes. The source raises flags about how they were selected. Allegations include their somewhat arbitrary inclusion, a lack of significant prior work experience in India, and that some mandatory documents weren't insisted upon during the selection process.
Was there any external review of this?
CVC and Mohiue are mentioned again. The source says they advised a detailed inquiry into this selection, specifically because it seemed to deviate from standard procedures laid out in the organization's own rulebook, the NBCC Works Manual, Clause 7.4.1.
So this section really focuses on the internal machinery, the rules, the processes, the human element, and the systems meant to keep things fair and accountable.
Absolutely. And while a lot of this is internal, the documents do give us glimpses of how external factors, external oversight, interact with all this.
Like court cases? There was a Delhi High Court case mentioned?
Yes, WPC 7813/2017. It was about interpreting tender criteria, what counts as similar work, especially involving basement construction related to those NBCC Heights and Greenview projects.
What was the takeaway noted in the source?
Just that the court acknowledged its own limited scope in second-guessing tender decisions, noting that a court's view might differ from the contracting authority's interpretation. It's a reminder of judicial boundaries in these commercial matters.
But the Supreme Court is mentioned as being much more hands-on, specifically with the Amrapali tenders.
Very much so. The documents refer to the Supreme Court actively monitoring those tenders, apparently on a weekly basis, which is quite intense oversight.
And there was a specific instance mentioned.
Yes, where the court actually approved considering a bid from a company, Ramji Dostal Construction, even though they slightly missed one of the financial criteria. Their turnover was just under 1.5% short.
Why would the court allow a bid that didn't technically qualify?
According to the source, this came after multiple tender attempts for that work had failed to get bids. It was based on a recommendation from the court receiver who was overseeing the whole Amrapali mess.
And the receiver's reasoning?
To galvanize the process. Essentially, the court and receiver felt they needed to be pragmatic to get these long-stalled projects moving, given the lack of interest from other fully compliant bidders. It shows the judiciary adapting to find practical solutions.
Definitely. Beyond courts, are there other external factors mentioned, like physical site constraints?
Yes, briefly. The East Kidwai Nagar project is mentioned, where the presence of a historical monument, the Gare Khan tomb, apparently impacts the the floor area ratio.
FR being how much you can actually build on the plot.
Exactly. So this historical constraint required specific actions mentioned in the documents, things like detailed plot demarcation surveys, and getting legal advice on filing a court petition to clarify how the monument legally restricts development potential.
It's a good reminder that these projects don't happen in a vacuum. Real-world constraints matter.
Absolutely. Historical, legal, regulatory. It all feeds in. These documents really give you a window into that complex environment.
Okay, so we have really gone deep into this stack of documents for you. We've pulled out details on everything from alleged procurement issues,
controversies around selecting brands, picking contractors,
through to project quality concerns, handling contractors like Rama Constructions, the Greenview situation.
Then the financial management questions, IIT Mandi funds, the PMGSY Bihar money, the TRRDA dispute.
And finally, those internal issues around vigilance, accountability, HR grievances like Mr. Rao's and Sri Ravi's promotion complaints, and consultant selection.
And layered over all that, we saw how external forces, courts, audits, even historical monuments interact with these internal dynamics.
So for you, listening, understanding these different layers is really key. Seeing how the specifics, like choosing a steel brand or managing a project account, connect to the bigger picture of processes, rules, human factors, and accountability in these huge organizations and public projects.
Yeah, these documents, whether detailing alleged failures or adherence to rules, really underscore just how critical transparency and strong processes are for integrity and actually delivering what's promised in this kind of large-scale work.
Which brings us to our final thought for you to mull over. We've seen references to layers upon layers of procedures in these documents, internal manuals, audits, vigilance wings, CVC guidelines, even Supreme Court oversight. So given all these mechanisms exist, what do you think are the biggest, most fundamental challenges that still remain in truly ensuring integrity and high performance in these massive public works and development projects today?